The world of payments, it never really stands still, does it? And for ISOs, for software companies, look, staying ahead of these kinds of shifts isn't just, smart. It's pretty essential.
Absolutely. The landscape is just constantly evolving, and understanding what new payment methods mean, well, it's crucial.
So today we're going to dive into something pretty significant. It was highlighted in a recent NMI article. It's about buy now, pay later, BNPL, and how it's going to start factoring into FICO scores.
Yeah, that's a really interesting development. Definitely has the potential to reshape how we think about consumer credit and payment behavior, too.
Right. And just for a quick refresher, the BNPL boom, it's been massive, particularly that pay in 4 model. 25% upfront, then 3 more payments over 6 weeks, often 0 interest.
Yeah, it really took off after 2021. Maybe the super fast growth has slowed a tiny bit, but it's still widely used.
Totally. But here's the kicker, and this is where it gets interesting for understanding the whole financial picture.
Okay.
Millions, literally millions of these BNPL accounts have opened up just since 2021. But a lot of that activity, it hasn't historically shown up on standard credit reports.
Mm-hmm. That's a pretty big blind spot.
It's a huge gap, right, in how we've tracked consumer credit, consumer obligations.
Yeah, it definitely created an incomplete picture for lenders assessing risk, absolutely, but also for consumers trying to get a handle on their own finances.
So the core of our deep dive today is really unpacking what FICO's decision to finally incorporate BNPL data into their scoring means. And maybe more importantly, what are the key things for you, our listeners, the ISOs, the software companies, to think about as this rolls out?
Well, I mean, the NMI article makes it pretty clear this isn't just talk anymore, it's happening. FICO announced their new system for including BNPL data, I think earlier this year, and they're implementing it now. It definitely lines up with, this growing recognition that BNPL is a significant piece of the consumer credit puzzle.
So that blind spot we mentioned is closing up. The article also pointed out that FICO worked with a huge BNPL player, on a study. They wanted to see how this might actually affect scores.
Okay, so what was the headline finding?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. For most people, about 85% having BNPL on their report would likely mean a pretty small change to their FICO score. We're talking plus or minus 10 points.
Only 10 points either way.
For the vast majority, yes. And actually, most within that group would see either no change at all or maybe even a slight increase.
Huh. That's maybe more positive than some expected.
Yeah, this latest study seems a bit more optimistic on the whole. Okay, what does this actually mean for consumers? There's Federal Reserve data suggesting that, on average, BNPL users might already have, say, lower credit scores, maybe more revolving debt, sometimes past bankruptcies.
And for some, it's their main option, right? Didn't the data say like 21% use it because it's the only payment method they can access?
Exactly. So for those folks, BNPL was maybe a less intimidating way to pay over time.
But now, with reporting, missed payments are going to hurt.
Precisely. Miss a BNPL payment, and it could now drag down your credit score significantly. The stakes are higher.
It really hammers home the point, doesn't it? BNPL is a loan. That 0% interest is nice up front, but it's still credit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And people need to remember that the 0% can vanish fast if you're late, and then interest kicks in.
Each BNPL is another promise to pay. If you don't meet it, there are consequences now reflected in that main score.
Okay. The article also mentioned something about the average age of accounts. Opening lots of small BNPL loans quickly could slightly lower the average age of your accounts, which is a factor in credit scores.
Precisely. It's another factor in scoring. The impact might be small, maybe negligible for some, but it's a detail consumers should probably be aware of.
It feels like this whole move really underlines a basic point. BNPL is a form of credit. That 0% interest thing can sometimes, mask that fact.
It really can, but it functions like a short-term loan. And like any loan, there's the responsibility to repay and, well, repercussions if you don't.
So this integration just brings it all into the mainstream credit world, a more complete picture.
Exactly. And it's worth remembering, as the NMI piece notes, traditional credit cards often come with perks, right? Rewards, purchase protections.
Sure.
BNPL options typically don't have those same built-in benefits, so consumers are making a trade-off. Immediate convenience, maybe that short-term 0 interest, versus those other features.
Good point. The article did highlight one potential upside, though, for people maybe underserved by traditional credit. Could using BNPL responsibly actually help them build a credit record?
That's a really important potential positive. If this reported BNPL activity shows consistent, on-time payments, it could absolutely become a valuable stepping stone, a pathway to establish creditworthiness for people who've maybe struggled to get started.
Okay, so let's try and tie this together. FICO's moving ahead, putting BNPL data into credit scores. That means more comprehensive reports.
Check.
And the early signs suggest the impact on scores for most people managing it okay will be pretty minimal, maybe even slightly positive for some.
Correct. But missed payments can now hurt your score. It reinforces that BNPL is fundamentally a loan.
So overall, this shift, it should hopefully lead to consumers making more informed choices about how they pay and manage debt.
Yeah, promotes a more holistic view of someone's financial obligations. And for you listening, the ISOs, the software companies, this shift in how consumers see BNPL and how it affects their credit, that's bound to influence payment strategies down the line.
No doubt. Understanding how your customers' behavior might change, how their preferences shift, that's going to be key to offering the right solutions and staying competitive.
So wrapping up, the big takeaway here is that BNPL hitting FICO scores is a major development. It could help some consumers, potentially pose risks for others, depending on how they use it.
And for businesses in the payments ecosystem, really getting a handle on these changes in consumer credit and payment habits is, well, it's more important than ever.
Absolutely. Which leads to a final thought for you to consider. What kind of new opportunities or maybe new challenges do you see emerging for your specific business and the customers you serve? Definitely something to mull over. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive. We hope you found this discussion helpful, and we encourage you to keep asking those tough questions. The payments world is always changing, and the more you know, the better you'll be able to navigate those changes and reach your goals. Thanks for listening.